In this video, you will learn how to multiply integers. Now remember, an integer is simply a number. So it's a number that could be negative, could be 0, could be positive, but it's a number without any sort of fractions. Okay, so we're going to multiply different types of numbers together. Now when you multiply, there are different parts of a multiplication problem. So for example, if you had 7 times 5 equals 35, the 7 and the 5 are called factors. So the two numbers you're multiplying are called factors, and then your solution is called the product. So if you're told find the product of 7 and 5, your answer would be 35, because you multiply 7 times 5 together. So if you're told find the product of 8 and 6, product means multiply, so you multiply 8 times 6 to get 48. Or if you had the product of 7 and 9, you take 7 times 9, and that gives me 63. When you multiply, there are different ways to represent multiplication. For example, if you are told 7 times 4, you could write this your traditional way with a 7 and then the times sign and then 4. Or you could use a raised dot like this. So 7 times 4 would be written like this as well, with a dot in between. Or I could use parentheses. I could put parentheses around the second number. That is the same thing as 7 times 4. Or I could put parentheses around the first number, or I could put parentheses around both numbers. All of this means the same thing. This means 7 times 4. Now when you multiply, what you are doing is you're basically adding a certain number of times. So for example, if you had 5 times 2, that means you have 5 2's that you add together. So you could think of this as 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2, which would equal 10. So you should at this point know how to multiply two positive numbers together. So the question comes in, what do you do when you have negative numbers? Well, it's still the same thought process. If you had 5 times negative 2, that means you add 5 negative 2's together. So you have negative 2 plus negative 2 plus negative 2 plus negative 2 plus negative 2. Now when you add negative numbers together, the signs are the same, so I can just add the 5 2's together like normal to get 10, but then I keep the sign, which is negative. So this would equal a negative 10. So if you had 4 times negative 2, that means you add 4 negative 2's together, which would give me negative 8. 3 times negative 2 would be 3 negative 2's added together, which would give me negative 6. 2 negative 2's would be negative 2 plus negative 2, which would be negative 4. 1 times negative 2 would just be negative 2. And then 0 times negative 2 would simply be 0, because anything times 0 is 0. So notice the pattern. On the left side, we are multiplying by 5, then 4, then 3, then 2, then 1, then 0. Keeping that pattern going, the next number would be negative 1, and then negative 2, negative 3, etc. So if we did negative 1 times negative 2, the question is, what would this equal? So this is kind of weird because you have two negatives being multiplied together. Well, if you look at the right side, look at the pattern over here. We had negative 10, negative 8, negative 6, negative 4, negative 2, and then 0. Notice the pattern is that you're adding 2 every time. Negative 10 plus 2 is negative 8, negative 8 plus 2 is negative 6, etc. So keeping this pattern going, 0 plus 2 would equal 2. So negative 1 times negative 2 would be a positive 2. if we keep the pattern going, the next number over here, we had 0, -1, next would be -2 times -2. And keeping the pattern going on the right, we add 2 more to 2, that would give me 4. So a lot of people don't understand or get really confused when you have a negative times a negative. Well, negative times a negative simply would be a positive number. Okay, kind of like with the subtraction. If you have 4 minus a -2, the minus the negative would become a positive. The two negatives make a positive. Same idea here. The two negatives multiplied together give me a positive number. And the reason is because that keeps the pattern going. So the rules is if you are multiplying numbers with different signs, your answer, your product, would be negative. So like here, positive times negative, 5 times -2 would be a negative number. Okay, positive 4 times -2 would be a -8. Okay, and then if the integers have the same sign, so they're both negative or both positive, then your answer, or your product, would be positive. Now let's work with some examples. -4 times 6. Well, 4 times 6 is 24. We have one positive number, one negative number. So different signs, meaning our answer will be negative. So my answer is a -24. 5 times -3. 5 times 3 is 15. One's positive, one's negative. So my answer would be a -15. -2 times -9. 2 times 9 is 18. They're both negative. The two negatives make a positive. So this would be a positive 18. -5 times 12. We have 5 times 12 is 60. One's positive, one's negative. So my answer would be a -60. 3 times -11. 3 times 11 is 33. One's positive, one's negative. So this would be a -33. Now if you have more than two numbers multiplied together, it's still the same thing. So if we wanted to, we can multiply any two numbers together first. It doesn't matter which two I do. But if I wanted, I could start with the -4 times -5. 4 times 5 is 20. Two negatives would make a positive. So this would be a positive 20. So what I have now is 3 times a positive 20. Both are positive numbers, so my answer would be a positive 60. Here we have three negative numbers. -3 times -4 times -5. If I do -3 times -4 first, that would be a positive 12. So that's positive 12. And then that times -5, that would give me 12 times 5, which is 60. And then positive times negative would be a -60. So my answer would be a -60. And I can multiply other numbers first too if I wanted. I could have done the -4 times -5 first. If I did the -4 times -5 first, negative times negative is positive. 4 times 5 is 20. So -3 times a positive 20 would give me a -60, because positive times negative gives me a negative number. Next example, we have -2 times -3 times 4. Well, -2 times -3 gives me a positive 6. Negative times negative is positive. Then 6 times 4 would give me a positive 24. Next we have -1 times -6 times -3. We have a -1 times a -6 would give me a positive 6, because 1 times 6 is 6. Negative times negative gives me a positive. So we have positive 6 times a -3. Positive times negative gives me a negative number. 6 times 3 is 18. So my answer is -18. Now lastly, it would be nice to know right off whether your final answer is positive or negative if you have a lot of numbers being multiplied together. So here if we had -1 times -2, the two negatives make a positive. Okay, so that one's not too bad. Here we have 3 negatives. So the two negatives here would make a positive, right? Negative times negative, that'd be a +2. So then positive times negative would be a negative number. Okay, what about 4 negatives? So the two negatives, -1 times -2, would make a positive number. And then the two negatives here, -5 times -6, would be a positive number as well. So we have positive times positive gives me a positive number. Okay, what about 5 numbers? So the first two negatives would make a positive. The second two negatives would make a positive. So we have, this is positive times a -3. Positive times negative would be a negative number. So notice the pattern. Okay, it alternates between positive and negative. 2 is positive, 3 negative, 4 positive, 5 negative. So bottom line, if there's an even number of negatives, so here we have 2 negatives, here we have 4 negatives, the even number of negatives would be a positive answer. If it's odd, so like 3 or 5 or 7, then your solution would be a negative number. So looking here, we have this question, -2 times 3 times -4 times -3. Would this be a positive or negative solution? Well, we have 1, 2, 3 negatives. 3 is odd, meaning that would be a negative solution. And that concludes our lesson for today.